Okay, I'm ready. Press start. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. I am at the South by Southwest Film Festival in Austin, Texas, and got out of a screening of Ready Player One, which surprise premiered here at South by Southwest. It's the world premiere, which was in attendance by Steven Spielberg, Ernest Cline, the writer of Ready Player One, the book, and wow, a majority of the cast, actually. And I will say that seeing a movie under those kinds of circumstances with that kind of excitement can really skew a person's opinion about how they feel about the film. This tends to not really have much of an effect on me, though. I will admit that I do like to see movies on an opening night with a paying crowd because I feel the reaction is more genuine. But I think a lot of the excitement over this was the fact that, of course, these are people at South by getting to see an early screening of this film. So a lot of excitement, a lot of elation. I think that may have tainted some of the early opinions about the movie. I'll have to admit, I am a big fan of the book, though I've never read it technically. I listened to the audio version of the book, which is actually narrated by Will Wheaton, who does a fantastic job. And it's not short. Most audiobooks tend to run about 6 hours. This is more than 12 hours, if I recall correctly. So he really, and you can tell that Will Wheaton is enjoying reading the book. That comes across. So if you are not a fan of the book, yet you are a fan of video games and video game culture and have been for a long time, talking about, everything back to retro video games through all the different consoles. And, excuse me, to give my background a little bit is that, yes, I was a retro gamer. My first game system was an Odyssey 2. Eventually got a used Atari 2600 and suffered through that. Some of the games on that is what I mean. What I mean specifically is the E.T. game. Okay, but that's a whole other. That could be another podcast. That could be a documentary that Ernest Cline is in, which you might actually be able to watch on your Xbox, and so look that up. Documentary about the Atari 2600 cartridges buried in a landfill, and their Atari 2600 cartridges of E.T. Sorry for that tangent, but. Just having gone through so many game systems and not just, being also a collector, I wouldn't just buy almost every game system that came out, but I would collect it, and I would create, when I retired it, and by retiring a game system, meaning I would take it out of rotation on my television, I would put it back in the original box, which I would keep, and then I would create what I would call the Desert Island collection for that game system, which was the 10 or 20 games that you had to have for that system. So I went through everything from, of course, a Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, Wii, Sega Saturn, Jaguar. I had the Atari Jaguar CD, a 3DO. I had a Philips CDI system, and I also worked on some video game magazines in the 90s, back in the day. Video Games and Computer Entertainment, other magazines like Tips and Tricks and whatnot. So, gaming culture is something that I've just, has kind of always been with me. I think a lot of it had to do with, frankly, Star Wars, because Star Wars, the way to continue the experience of Star Wars is by playing Star Wars video games. And there was a game on the Odyssey 2 system that was not a Star Wars game. It was a space battle game. And in this space battle game, you actually fought these ships that looked just like TIE fighters. I mean, they basically ripped off TIE fighters. So yeah, I think there's crossover, obviously, in pop culture and video games and movies, and Steven Spielberg himself is an avid gamer. I mean, everyone knows that there's a game room at Amblin Entertainment. So I think the people that love Ready Player One, the book, and are excited about seeing the movie is the video game generation, right? And I think I would say, I mean, this is a movie that's not based on a video game. It's based on gaming culture. And on that scale, I would say that this is perhaps the best movie about games and video games. It truly is. I mean, it's the best in the sense that it captures the passion. It helps you understand characters that love different types of gaming and different characters that permeate that world. So on the level of video game, if you threw Ready Player One into a list of video game movies, it would be number one on that list. Out of the gate. Okay. Having said that, I had some problems with it. Now, I'm sure you know the basics of the story, which is about this character, Wade Watts, who lives in a not too distant future, 2045 to be exact. And in this not too distant future, we live in a time where there's just horrible economic disparity. There's the very rich and the very poor. And Wade basically spends most of his time in this place called the Oasis. And in the Oasis, you go to school in the Oasis. You have an avatar of yourself that is an idealized version of you that you create. And Wade himself in the book is not an attractive, kind of schlumpy dude, I would say heavy set. So you don't really know what your friends look like in the real world. You're just meeting the avatar versions of them. So, so when you meet other characters, you're not exactly sure who they might be. But Wade goes into the Oasis, and there's, in the Oasis also, there has been this, this character has created the guy who created the Oasis actually left behind after his death an Easter egg. And the Easter egg will lead to, if you conquer these levels, you will not only win his entire inheritance, which is like, I don't know, $1 trillion or something, some insane amount of money. You will also own the Oasis. That's the basics of it. It does have something of a Willy Wonka feel. So, in any case, that's the setup for it, and it's the book opens in a really amazing way where you see this, you hear the content of this video that was released upon his death, the creator of the Oasis. And everyone is searching for this. I mean, everyone. I mean, there are companies and there are clans that have formed, which are groups of players that play together that have agreed that when they find it, they're going to split the money. So the world for a long time is sort of structured around trying to find this Easter egg so that they can, they can inherit that money and own the Oasis. In the opening scene, one of the beginning parts of the film, there's this huge car race where I guess this is a movie that even though I'm mixed about it, I feel that it's one that you'll want to see twice because there are so many Easter eggs and references, and Spielberg even mentions that there were things that people from ILM snuck in at the last minute. I mean, so many minor Easter eggs. I'm not going to spoil any of them. I mean, the internet has already done a lot of that in the trailer, but I think that on second viewing, the second viewing could be all about finding these Easter eggs. There are some really great ones for me. I mean, one in particular in the trailer that you'll see is the 1966 Batmobile from Adam West's Batmobile. So is in this. So the race, if you just look across all the vehicles that are in this race, I mean, it's an insane number of game references and movie references and whatnot. And I think only someone like Steven Spielberg could have actually cleared the rights to be able to use all of that. But so there's also, in particular, a lot of 80s references, because that's where this creator of the Oasis, who's the character name escapes me for the moment. I don't know. It's late. I'm exhausted. So bear with me. My apologies. My voice, I have festival voice. This is what happens when you're at a festival and you lose track of what day it is. So in any case, so the creator of the Oasis is kind of an 80s kid, grew up with 80s video games and pop culture and music and all of that. So this beginning race with all these cars, Wade kind of figures out there's a different way to run this race. And it's actually kind of surprising that no one else thought of this. And he ends up getting the first key. That's as far as I'll get into any sort of spoiler and all. This is all this stuff is you've probably seen in the trailers and whatnot. So in any case, he gets this key, which leads him to become a celebrity in the Oasis. And then it attracts the attention of a girl, hopefully it's a girl, named Artemis. And Artemis in the movie is played by Olivia Cooke, who was recently in, she was in Thoroughbreds. So we talked to the director a couple weeks ago. So Olivia Cooke is fantastic in the film. I don't think anybody's bad in this movie. I mean, it's got a really good cast. I mean, including Ty Sheridan, who's the lead. But there's something about it. Here's the big problem. I mean, here's the big problem I have with the movie, and you might not notice this unless I point it out, but it has this sort of weird, most of the movie takes place in this Oasis arena. So while you see these physical characters in the real world, once they go into the virtual world, you're just watching a movie that looks like Polar Express, or there was a Final Fantasy movie that was released theatrically that had digital versions of characters, and they just act like people in this. I mean, they there's something kind of, it's something off-putting that doesn't kind of work. And I'll tell you why. As I imagined the book, when you go in the Oasis, and this also applies to playing video games, when you go into the Oasis or you play a VR game, the two primary points of view are first-person point of view, where you are seeing everything around you. You'll see other characters. You don't see yourself unless you're in a mirror. And the other perspective is third person, which is where you're kind of behind yourself a little bit, so you can see most of your body, if not all of your body, walking into a space, but you're placed somewhat behind, so you're kind of following the character, sort of in a little omniscient way, a couple feet behind your own head, if that makes sense. So, but the way that the virtual world is shot, it's just shot like a movie. So you're just there and you're seeing things. Now, I understand that makes sense, but that's not how technically it would work. It's not how I envisioned it, having, heard the book or imagined it in the book. And that's not how video games work, right? I mean, you're basically just watching a movie, a Pixar movie with weird looking humans. And the other major flaw of this film is the fact that the world building. There's not a lot of world building. I mean, the movie starts with this sort of clunky narration that kind of sets up this, I live in the Stacks, which is this really poor area of Ohio where it's like, trailer homes are kind of stacked on top of each other. And Wade Watts lives there, lives with his aunt and his aunt's boyfriend, and then he goes into the Oasis on a daily basis, presumably to look for this money. In the book, it goes into much more detail that there's a structure to your life. Like, you have to go to school. You go to school in the Oasis. The Oasis is about education more than anything. That's why it was created. You can also play video games in it. And when you go in the Oasis, you go to a specific school, right? So in order to explore other areas of the Oasis, you kind of have to, well, break some of the rules. And that's actually a very interesting part, which is not explored so well in the movie. The movie just really kind of begins with this race and the, finding and acquiring of the first key. So because the world building isn't really set up so well, that there's this incredible economic disparity in I'm assuming not just the United States, but the world. There's horrible economic disparity. Wade Watts is dirt poor, right? The Oasis is an escape for a lot of people, but it's also an educational tool, and by breaking the rules somehow, he's able to get this first key. It just didn't, because of the way that the story was told, with the basically choosing to just ignore how a video game works and just saying, we're just going to make it like a movie, but it looks like, to me, it looks like Polar Express, which I always thought was kind of odd and distancing and emotionless. They look like mannequins and dolls. There's just sort of a lifelessness to it, that just doesn't work. But because of that, it just didn't really, I could not become fully engaged. Now, having read the book, I didn't really need the world building necessarily, but it really matters because of what the rules are of how the Oasis works as opposed to the real world, why the Oasis is so addicting to everyone. And secondly, it really defines what the stakes are. And frankly, the stakes are not really, other than Wade having kind of a lousy life because his aunt has an abusive, sort of shady boyfriend, Wade doesn't seem to have that bad of a life in the movie. So the stakes are not really laid out, other than I'd like to have a lot of money and own the Oasis, but that's not, it just doesn't seem like it had the kind of weight that the book had. The book really defined like how desperate Wade was and how dire the circumstances were, not just for Wade, but for other people living in this kind of sad existence, where they needed the Oasis to escape because their situation that they lived in was just so depressing and sad. So that's kind of the main reason why the film didn't work for me. I also wonder if you're not a video game fan, you don't know video game culture, I'm not sure that this movie is really going to appeal to non-gamers. Now, you can look on that as a good thing, like hardcore gamers love when it's like, this is a game only for hardcore gamers, it's not for casual gamers. Well, I don't know that if you're really not into video games, I'm not sure that this movie is going to, and I can't really say because I really know so few people that are actually not into gaming and pop culture, but I'm just not sure if you're not into gaming, if this is going to matter all that much. I know Spielberg said at the beginning or they said during the Q&A that the goal was, you don't have to like video games to like this movie. I actually think that, I don't know, if you're not a gamer, it's not going to mean all that much. It's just going to seem confusing. So, I'm sorry to admit that. I think that the more interesting story was really like the class disparity that the book deals with so well, and just the stakes in the book just felt like the world, and in this it just seemed to be driven just more by greed, I guess. So, and there's just a lot of also typical Spielbergisms that I feel kind of get in the way. So I have to say, I really wanted to like this much more. And look, it's the book, it's the movie. The book is always going to exist in the form that it is, that you can enjoy. And hopefully the movie will encourage people to go and read the book. But, oh man, this is going to sound so cliche. I like the book more than the movie. I just like the book a lot more than the movie. Books do kind of ruin some films in that sense. It might have been, especially in this age of storytelling where, the option is we can, turn something into a limited series on Netflix or Hulu or HBO or whatever. I just don't know that, a 2-hour and 20-minute movie is the best way to tell this story. I could easily seen this as an 8 to 10 hour mini series divided up however you wanted. Like it just seemed like that maybe would have been the better way to tell this story, to go into that kind of detail, I just feel that Spielberg did a bad job of world building, which is something that he's usually good at. I mean, maybe just being too close to the subject matter, in the sense that I feel Ernest Cline kind of made this movie, Ernest Cline wrote the book to bait Spielberg into making this movie. I mean, I remember reading the book thinking, this is Steven Spielberg. And when it was announced that Steven Spielberg was going to make the movie out of the Ready Player One book, it's like, well, of course he is. The guy who created the Oasis may as well have been Spielberg in a sense. It's 80s culture kid and into video games. It just, I don't know. But I know I sound like a downer on it. I think I was a contrarian to everyone at the screening, in the sense that everyone seemed to love it at the screening, but it felt lacking in that emotional connection. So there you are. An interesting thing happened actually during the South by Southwest screening, and that is that during a key moment at the climax of the film, when something very big is about to happen, the projector, it's not a projector, it's a digital projector, but the sound went out and the movie froze, and the crowd went kind of nuts, stopped for a little bit, and then they restarted it. And then at the exact same point, the same thing happened. Sound went out, movie froze, crowd went nuts again, went crazy. And then they went back the same moment, and just as the froze part was about to happen, it didn't. The sound continued. The key moment in the film progressed past this really key moment, and the crowd went apeshit. I almost think that the breaking down of the projection system at the Paramount Theater was actually enhanced the experience, because in a way it was like a video game where you fail at a certain level and then you have to try again, and then you fail again, and then you get to that moment and then you actually succeed after so much trial and error. I kind of felt like that was that part of the movie. It actually was not, because people, lights came on and, people were scrambling. But I almost think that would have been something really clever to add, would be to think that, something bad happened and you have to start over. I mean, that's a very, very much a video game trope, is having to go over familiar ground again, but try something different in order to succeed and reach your goal. So I hope you appreciate this non-spoiler review. I mean, these are first impressions. I do plan to see it again, just because I really do want to see those references. I'd like to see it maybe perhaps under different circumstances and whatnot. But I would say that this is not a negative review, a mixed review. And I think it really has to do with the fact that, look, I'm a fan of the book, and I really wanted to see more of that book on screen. So All right, I gotta get some rest, and then I've got more screenings and panels and whatnot from South by Southwest. We'll have more podcasts later this week, so subscribe to Film Thread on iTunes or follow us on SoundCloud. Download it, post a review on iTunes. That helps more people discover the Film Threat podcast. And thank you for listening. I'm Chris Gore. Follow Film Thread on everything, and let's get out of here.